Welcome everyone to this live stream of a very, very important conversation. Our guest today is Mahesh Vyas, perhaps the preeminent voice we need to listen to right now on the state of the economy. Now, CMIE has been saying for a long time that the next big crisis is going to come in the job space. And the CMIE has also said that 21 million jobs have already been lost when we talk about the formal salaried sector. How bad is it going to get, and what can we do to fix it? Remember, it's younger people who have been the hardest hit. In fact, people under 30. And I'm sure many of you are listening to this conversation today. Now, this is all happening at a time when India has crossed the 5 million mark when it comes to the coronavirus cases. But it really is the economy that is ailing. I want to start by asking Mr. Vyas to first break down for us what kind of data we're really talking about when we talk about the unemployed. Because we also have to remember that 35 million people were already unemployed before any of this happened. So Mahesh Vyas, welcome to Mojo Story and a live stream, and tell us how bad it is.
Well, the degree of badness has reduced a bit from what it was like in April. So April was terrible, and it looked like we were really in very, very deep trouble. And it's good to know that we have come out of that problem. That problem was as bad as this, that we have a total workforce, people employed, of the order of around 403 million people. 403 million people are the people who are employed on an average in the year 2019-20, fiscal 2019-20. In the month of April, the first month of this fiscal, 121 million of them lost their jobs. That was really very bad. That number has now reduced dramatically down to just 11 million. So we had 121 million jobs lost. We have only 11 million jobs lost today. So I think the situation is not as bad as it was then. Many of those who had lost their jobs and who were the daily wage earner types, the hawkers and the daily workers, they have got their labor back. They've got their employment back. The difficult part in the story is that the salaried employees, those who will find it difficult to get a job once they lose it, their number has increased compared to what it was even in April. So everyone else seems to have started getting his or her job back, but the salaried job people are the ones who are even now on a net basis losing their jobs. So while only 11 million jobs are lost compared to the last year, and that's not a small number, 11 million jobs, but salary jobs, we have 21 million jobs lost. That means some jobs were made up in other sectors, essentially in agriculture and farming. That's where people have gone. But in so far as salary jobs, it's really stressful to see on a base of around 87 million jobs, 21 million are gone. That's a very big hit for the salary stuff.
So let me ask you this. Younger people are probably the worst hit. And, every day one meets friends, acquaintances, young people who say they send their resumes out and never hear back. And I think your data actually shows us that the age group of, let's say, about the early 20s to 30 has been really, really badly hit. So can you break this down in terms of age? What age group are we really talking about here?
So you're right. The biggest hit is in the age group 20 to 29. That's where a lot of people have been hit, and even in the 30s. So it's only people who are above 40 till 60 who have been safe. They have not seen any losses in jobs. And there is also a small gain over there. And this largely is because of the agricultural sector, which can absorb all kinds of people under the name of saying that I'm employed, whereas actually they could just be, pushing some mud around. So I think the problem is in people who are less than 40 years of age. The problem for the younger people in the age bracket 20 to 29 is particularly severe. What is important to note is that when a young person graduates, whether it is from high school or it is graduation, that the person is coming into the labor market, if he or she came into the labor market in 2019, most likely she has lost her job in 2020, early 2020. And those people who graduate now or have graduated last summer are not getting jobs. So you have two cohorts, those that graduated in 2019 and those that graduated, if at all they did graduate because of the exams problem, in 2020. Two cohorts are going to hope that they will get a job in 2021 when a new cohort will come. I think that's a serious problem for the people in the 20s. Forget the numbers. I just shudder to think of what happens to the careers and the future of these young people who have invested, their parents have invested their savings into the education of their children, and they need to see those returns coming back, their lives getting settled, to so to say, into decent jobs. And you can get a job as, let us say, a farmer or maybe as a plumber, but getting a decent salary job is where the challenge is, and that is not a very happy situation right now.
Let me ask you this. If there were to be no further job losses, how many jobs would India need to create to make sure that this situation does not get dire? I know that your data suggests, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that we need close to 10 million new jobs every year, because that's roughly how many people are getting their degrees, are of the working age group, and are looking to join the labor force. But we're already running short of existing jobs as we look at the salaried class that has been laid off. So what kind of jobs does India need to maintain for this to not completely snowball into a gigantic, possibly humanitarian crisis?
If you look at it in a simplistic fashion, if you look at what the data has been telling us so far, it looks like the minimum jobs you require is of the order of around 7 to 8 million jobs per year. So that's like rock bottom. But that's an unfair way of looking at this, in the sense that they're saying that situation hasn't been too bad. Let's maintain this reasonably bad situation, and let's only create jobs to not make it worse. But that's a pretty bad or a pretty low ask. I would say that we require to solve the jobs problem in a larger sense. So what is this? A, we need to count all the people who are unemployed today. And there are two kinds of unemployed people. There are those who are unemployed, they're willing to work and are unable to get jobs. That is the classic definition of an unemployed person. You should be willing to work and you should be trying to get a job, looking for a job actively and not getting. Then you're unemployed. That count is of the order of around 30 million people or 32 million people. Now, there's another class, which is another 10 million or so, maybe even 12 million, is a class which says that we're willing to work. We don't have a job, but I'm not actively looking for a job. This is a powerfully defeated person that, I've tried hard, I'm willing to work, but there are really no jobs around. So what do I go looking for? So I would add to the 32 million, another 12 or 13 million, and say the count of the stock of people who require to be employed is of the order of 45 million.
So break that down for me. There are 35 million already unemployed. There are another 21 million who you say have lost their jobs since this lockdown, right? So what's the actual absolute number of the unemployed who are looking for work, according to you, by the end of this year?
So the people who have lost their jobs, okay, some of them have given up and gone home saying, I'm not working anymore. They're out of the labor force. They're the people who are stressed out and they're not looking for jobs. So we can only count those people who are saying that I'm willing to work and looking for a job, or willing to work and not necessarily looking for a job. That stock is around 45 million. Okay, so don't double count those 11 million that lost their jobs, because they will either show up and saying I'm unemployed and willing and looking for work, or they will even have left the jobs scenario. But I'll say, besides this 45 million that I'm saying we require to find jobs for, and we can always leave some of them as unemployed because you'll always have some unemployment, let us say 2-3%. But I think the bigger challenge, just a second. The bigger challenge is that India has an extremely low labor participation rate and an extremely low employment rate. Our employment rate is 40% and threatening to go lower than that. This number should be close to 60%. of our working age population, which is 1 billion people. So we require to get jobs for this very large section of people, which is around 200 million people, is where we need to find jobs. So the challenge is to raise our labor participation, to raise our employment rate much higher than the abysmally low numbers we've got of 40% right now.
So, Mr. Vyas, that's of course linked to the larger state of the economy, and I do have questions on that. But we are getting questions and some comments on our live stream, including people who have lost their jobs. We have a Mukesh Panikar writing in saying, "I lost my job as a travel agent. The entire travel sector has collapsed. I haven't been able to find a job for the last 2 months." And then there's a comment from Sanju saying, "But the government says it does not have this data." Now, of course, this reference is to what the government said in Parliament, where asked specifically about job losses among migrant workers, the government said it has no data at all. So this data that you are quoting, is this to just the formal sector, or are you counting in the informal sector and daily wages as well?
We are everybody. Everyone and anyone who lives in a stable household. Means even if it is a plastic sheet kind of a household, doesn't matter. But so long as the person is not a vagabond, I mean, if the person is just, a drifter, then we will be missing the person out. We are missing people out who are living on construction sites. We cannot capture them. But if insofar as a person is living in a structure, no matter how illegal, no matter how legal, no matter how unstable, we are covering. We cover all the slums, we cover all the juggi jhoparis, we cover all the buildings, we cover all the housing societies. So all kinds of people, whether working in businesses, government, or in informal or unorganized sector, they're all covered.
So I want to now step back and ask you how much worse you think it's going to get. And I wish there was good news for everybody out there who's a young person, who's looking for a job or who's a lost job. But how much worse, according to you, is this going to get given the larger state of the economy? And we'll do some number crunching on the state of the economy in a while. But let me get your take first.
See, two things. The really worst scenario is behind us. So that was the month of April. And we have come out of that. So let's actually note that the worst is behind us. But having recovered from that a substantial amount, the problem is, and the sad news from here is, it seems to be slipping. The improvement that we saw in jobs in the month of May, June, and July, we did not see an improvement in August. So the good news kind of stopped. And it looks like, I mean, this is not a good thing to say, but nevertheless, I should be honest to say, it looks like it can get worse in September. And I fear that the job scenario may be slipping in September, October, November. It's not looking good at all.
But now, the economy, the larger state of the economy, we have different estimates, and I have them before me. We have your estimates, but we also have CRISIL, for example, estimating a permanent loss of 13% of real GDP over the medium term. We have the World Bank saying 40 million livelihoods may have been hit. And the ADB has revised its contraction figures to 9% from about 4.5%. What actually is going on here?
Well, our estimates are at least 1 quarter old. So our new estimates will come out in the first week of October. We release this every quarter. So it's scheduled to be out in October. And we are obviously going to revise our numbers very substantially down compared to the minus 5.5% we said a quarter ago. So I think the number is likely to be closer to minus 10% for the year as a whole. That's my broad guess. People I respect People I would heed advice of are talking in terms of 14% contraction or thereabouts. So these are economists who have been in government, held very senior positions in government. I respect them a lot. And if they're saying close to minus 14%, I think they know what they're talking about. So this is really, really very stressful. And we have seen 24% decline in the first quarter. I have heard their analysis of how this will play out, and I think they're still being kind to say that there will be some kind of a recovery in the last quarter. I am deeply skeptical because I don't see what are those forces that are going to lift us out of the situation that we are in right now. So there are no forces that are actually coming into play. It's not going to be the private sector for sure. They're not going to go and invest in these times. They're going to cut back on their costs as much as they can. If you cut back on costs, you're actually shrinking the economy. You're just ensuring that you don't sink, but in doing that, you're going to cut down a bit. The government is not willing to spend, is showing no inclination to spend. April to July, their expenditure, central government expenditure, was 11% higher compared to a year ago. That is like business as usual. That's not a path to recovery at all. So, I don't see what will pull us out of this, and therefore I see a continuing slide.
Yeah. So we have a question. I have some questions on that, but we have, yeah. Right. So sounds alarming, but we have a question from Prasad, and Prasad says, are we ignoring the services sector, referring of course to GST, which can provide a large number of jobs with a little more training and focusing on the manufacturing sector? Now, GST, the states effectively are not going to get GST revenue. The states are struggling at their own level. How do you look at this whole debate around GST in the context of which the finance minister famously said, this is an act of God?
So Mr. Prasad said that are we ignoring services? And I do not know who the we over here is. So if we can identify the we who's ignoring this, probably we can talk to her and try and sort out this problem. But we do not know who the we over here is. Now, on the GST front, obviously we've been seeing the economy tank, and along with it, the GST tanks, which makes it even more difficult for the government to pump in money and revive the economy. So I think, and if the states are starved, then it is a very serious problem because it is reneging on an effective promise to pay, and then it's all kind of complicated laws that come into play. I think what's important is to get the economics of this right, to get the economy right in this. If the central government does not borrow and give money to the states, if it does not borrow and spend more aggressively itself, if it does not do this, it will just see the economy continuing to shrink. And as it shrinks, it will get even lesser money. So it is better for it to use the bad option, which is not the worst option, which is to borrow and spend. That would be a solution out, and then we will not be ignoring the services sector, the manufacturing sector, and any other sector.
Right. So there's another question for you coming from Deepak Joshi, Mr. Mahesh Vyas. Please ask Mr. Vyas how self-employment, the job sector, people who are self-employed will recover. Are you looking at a 2-year period? And how should the government look at people who are self-employed and not salaried?
The self-employed people have been on the rise in the last 3 years, or more importantly, the last 2 years. In the last 2 to 3 years, it is the self-employed people besides agriculture that has been growing. Even agriculture is a self-employed person. But if you keep that aside and look at the rest of the self-employed, even that is growing very rapidly. And mind you, I'm saying because employment has been stable. 403 million is almost like a rock solid number. It moves a little up and down, but the average remains over there. And in the midst of this, we see self-employed people rising up. But although for 3 years we have seen self-employed people, which are basically small entrepreneurs, increasing, they are not creating a multiplier effect and seeing salary jobs go up. So if you see enterprise rising, then employment should rise. That's the meaning of being an entrepreneur. So a self-employed person only means that I could not get a job anywhere else. So I have employed myself to do whatever little work I do. I could be doing a gig somewhere, or I could be doing some small job somewhere. These are unstable professions. These are unstable ways of earning a living. This is not a reliable or a sustainable way of growing one's career or savings and creating a nest for your retirement or building a family. So I think this is not a very happy trend. We should see entrepreneurship, but that should be large entrepreneurship that can create more employment.
So how is it going to happen, Mr. Vyas? How is it going to happen? How?
We are in a ditch right now. In normal times, my answer would have been very different. But when we are in the situation that we are in, which is we are in a ditch, we require the government to create demand. How will it create demand? By spending money on building infrastructure. This is one. This has got A and B. A is to build physical infrastructure, but I will emphasize more than physical infrastructure now, social infrastructure. Invest. The government needs to invest into primary health centers, into health at large, education, and other social infrastructure, which is really wanting. And then you have physical infrastructure like roads and airports and so on and so forth. Besides that, there is a need to create direct demand as well, wherever it is possible for it to do so by direct transfers. But I would emphasize that a little lesser, but aggressive building of infrastructure, physical and social, is the way out. Once it spends money on that, private sector will come in to participate in that.
Right. Now, there's a question here. I'm not sure if it's actually a bit sarcastic or ironic, but I'm going to read it out nevertheless. This is somebody who identifies as editor topicality, who says, can the act of God comment by the finance minister enable a clause by companies that will then mean that the companies will let go of people without proper compensation? Now, I first read it and I thought this is an ironic comment, but the fact is that when Nirmala Sitharaman made that comment about it being an act of God, I think there's a real fear among people that companies will not, in fact, maybe give proper sort of, retrenchment packages, will not provide the compensation packages that are required by labor law. And for example, a lot of this I'm hearing in the education sector. We've been closely tracking what's happening in the education sector. And the one end of the spectrum, you have private schools charging full fees, and they say it's to maintain their staff. But I have any number of teachers writing to me every day saying that they're actually not getting paid their full salaries and they've been subjected to arbitrary pay cuts. So this real fear that is reflected in this question, that if the government is going to attribute all of this to COVID, then perhaps does that give an excuse to not follow corporatized norms of retrenchment?
So I think God is being painted as a very cruel entity for having caused such misery to us. And while you can paint God as a very cruel entity causing such massive pain, I think it is within our control not to be equally cruel. So I don't think it's proper to say that we throw to the winds all laws which have been in place under the name of act of God. So I don't think that would be a fair thing to do. At the same time, I will say that businesses are, and we should expect them to conduct themselves in the most self-preserving manner. So how does it do that? It is obviously doing it right now. It is cutting down on costs. But cutting down on costs by reneging on contracts is not a good thing to do. And reneging on contracts on labor is a particularly bad thing to do. So I think it is important to give sufficient notice. So if people have to be laid off because there is no business, for example, let's say you're a travel agency and there's obviously no business for a long time to come, I think it's perfectly fine without bringing God into picture to say, sorry, boss, I require to let you go, but I will give you a severance pay. And the concept of severance pay needs to be established. If there's a gratuity which is due, which should be actually saved for the person, the provident fund, all these things which are due to labor should be duly paid. But if labor has to be laid off, do it respectfully and
Yeah.
don't blame God for it.
What did you make of the comment you heard in Parliament? You know, when the government said it has no data, like it was very peculiar because it was said in the context of saying that we don't know how many migrant workers died as they were trying to walk home. And very quickly, from my own archives of reporting in the last few months, I was able to identify one accident in Oraya in which 24 died, one accident where villagers came from Madhya Pradesh where they died on the rail tracks in Aurangabad. That was another 16. A family in Agra, a family in Haryana. I was able to place about 50 workers' deaths just from a cursory glance at my own work, Mr. Vyas. And then in the same context, the government tells Parliament that we actually don't know how many jobs have been lost. The World Bank, of course, in this context of migrant workers says 40 million livelihoods may have been hit. How does the government spend the money on rehabilitating workers when it says it doesn't have the data of either deaths or job losses? Can you hear me, Mr. Vyas? I think we've lost Mr. Vyas and the line to Mr. Vyas for a moment. So what I'm going to do is, till he gets back in, we are going to read some of the comments that we are getting. We continue to be on the live stream and we're waiting for Mr. Mahesh Vyas to join us back in. But in the meantime, what we were talking about was what was said in Parliament yesterday. And I'm just going to read out some of the questions we're getting as Mr. join us. Yeah. We have a question from Shikha Rakshit. Shikha says, I'm a teacher. My private school was forced to remain shut. A lot of teachers are having to give private tuitions to students whose parents are ready to pay. And naturally, we are earning less. So the comments are coming in. Remember, we are looking at the economic crisis. We're looking at the economic crisis here in India. And some of the figures that we heard from Mr. Vyas were truly startling. And I'm just going to take you through some of those figures that Mr. Vyas actually shared with us. And he is talking about 21 million salaried jobs that have been lost since April, since the lockdown. Now, if you are one of those and you want to share your story with us, please feel free to write to us and share your story. My email is barkha.dutt@bdmpl.org, or you can write to our channel. Our email is themojo.in@gmail.com. Now, I'm still hoping that Mahesh Vyas can rejoin us. We're waiting. Technology does play its own part in our live programming. But we do have another question coming in. But I'm told that Mr. Vyas is going to join us any moment now. Okay. Yeah, we have questions, but I'm just going to keep Mr. Vyas back in because the questions have been coming in and we can see him there trying to get back with us. Welcome back. We lost you there briefly, but we kept the conversation going, Mr. Vyas, because we do have lots of questions for you. And I'm just going to go back to the questions here. Okay, so Mahesh, we were talking about teachers and we did have a teacher write into us saying that teachers in the private sector are having to actually fall back on private tuitions to make ends meet because they've had to deal with salary cuts, even while private schools are charging salaries in full. There's another question coming in from Prakhar Srivastav, who says, how safe is it at this moment, according to Mr. Vyas, to take loans? A large number of loans are being taken from fintechs in particular. Would there be any red flags at all? So would you have any red flags on loans and loans in particular from financial technology companies, Mahesh Vyas?
The ability to repay is the most important factor that goes into whether you should be taking a loan or not. I would say if there is a real serious need for you to take a loan, like a medical emergency or something equivalent, I think it's okay to take a loan and be careful how much you can take a loan. But I would be very careful. I would not say this is the best time to take a loan for, let us say, a consumer durable. It's better you postpone that for some time. So unless it's an absolute necessary, in which case, of course, you have to take a loan. But by and large, I would not advise anyone to take a loan at this time. Not the best time, because incomes are shrinking and the prospects of income rising is shrinking as well.
Now, when we lost you, I was asking you to comment on the government response to there being no data for deaths or job losses among migrant workers. How did you see that remark? And how does the government announce a relief package when it doesn't know exactly how many families have either lost loved ones or lost jobs? Like, isn't there a contradiction in terms there? If you do not have the data, how do you help? What are you going to spend this money on? How are you going to target the spending?
I would say God knows how they do it then. So if they don't have the data, how will they spend the money that they say that they have allocated to this purpose? So I think it's critically important, and the government has failed very seriously in putting its statistical machinery together. Just less than a week ago, we celebrated the 100th birthday of C.R. Rao, one of our topmost statisticians. But I think we are failing him in our inability, in the government's inability to actually have a very robust, sound statistical system. So,
but is this a failure of that infrastructure, that architecture? Is it deliberate politics? That question will be asked. There's an assembly election coming up in Bihar. Massive number of migrant workers actually come from states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Maybe this is not data that the government wants to release right now. Maybe it has the data. We don't know, right?
Any answer to your question, Barkha, is conjecture. So I will refrain from answering that question directly. So I do not know if this is politics to do with Bihar, to do with some posturing, to do with something else or the other. I say whatever the reasons be, it may be politics, it could be finances, it could be anything. The point is that it is not in any way justifiable that our statistical system is crumbling. That's not okay. That does not behove us. We have boasted that we are the fastest growing large economy in the world. And we have the worst statistical system amongst all those large economies. That's just not done. It doesn't kind of fit in, So CMI, of course, is filling in that role that the government should be doing. I don't think there's any country in the world where a private agency estimates the unemployment rate for the country. I don't think there's any country where the government has abdicated its responsibility of estimating the unemployment rate and a private sector is doing it as a public good. So I think the government needs to figure this out, but more importantly, it at least needs to know where it needs to spend the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
If migrants are a problem and you want to spend money, you need to know where they are.
Yeah. Now, a very interesting question has come, which actually may make you relook at how we classify unemployment. This question is from Abhilash Pradhan, Mahesh Vyas. He says, my wife is a mechanical design engineer. She has not been laid off, but she's not getting paid, and she hasn't been paid a salary since April 2020, nor is she being given any work. The employer just says there are no projects needed now. Is this legal? And I will add to that, what happens in the situation where people are kind of just kept on hold? So they're not struck off the rolls, but they're not being given work and they're not being given salaries. And a lot of these stories are going to emerge, as we investigate them, as we dig deeper. Did we lose you again? Are you there, sir? Okay, we seem to be having technology issues with Mr. Vyas today, but this is a very, very interesting question, and I'm going to wait for Mr. Mahesh Vyas to video to return to us. But this is a very interesting question that has come from you, and I really actually want him to respond to it, because I'm wondering how many of you, Abhilash, how many more of you there are out there, and I'm going to try and see if he can actually hear us, because I can see him again. But really an interesting question there, that people who are on the rolls but not getting paid at all. Mr. Vyas, can you hear me? I can see him, but I don't think he can. I don't think he can hear me. So we're going to request him to reconnect. And in the meantime, I am going to actually just keep taking more questions. Someone has said it's great that you started live streaming. I hope you will forgive us some of our technical errors because this is our first live stream. Mahesh, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back with you.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm back here. Hello.
So Mahesh, there's a very interesting question that came from, yeah, hi Mahesh. There was a very interesting question. I don't know if you were able to hear it before we lost you, from Abhilash Pradhan, whose wife is on the rolls but neither getting paid nor getting any work. How does she qualify in the larger conversation around unemployment? Mahesh, if you can hear me. If you can hear me, I don't know, technology is not on our side today. I actually don't know what's happening. So we're going to keep this conversation going because I think the questions have just got interesting, and we're going to request him to rejoin the call, please, if we can do that. And like I was saying, I really would want your feedback, all of you. Please do write to me. I'm going to repeat my email again because I'm sure there are many stories like the one we heard from Abhilash, because I really wonder how many more people are out there who are on the rolls but are neither getting paid nor getting any work. And
but I'm back again.
yeah, Mahesh, you're back. Mahesh, just switch on your video if you can hear.
So I'll answer.
Yeah, please answer.
I'll answer Pradhan.
Yeah, please answer Pradhan. Yeah, please answer Pradhan, but we can't see you. Yeah, please answer, but we can't see you. Yeah.
Okay, I hope you can see me now.
No, we can't see you.
There are three things I'm saying. There is.
Yeah. Can you just start your video? Can you just start your video?
My video is on, but you can't see me.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put you in the waiting room till we can fix your shot, and then we're going to try, and yeah, for some reason we can't see you. So we're just going to try and fix this, and in the meantime, I'll keep the questions coming. We'll just maybe ask you to join again, and I'll take a few more questions. Yeah. Okay, so we're still here, and we are getting more questions. We have a question from Bhupesh, who says that the government should tell people how much they are spending in different platforms. And another question comes, will we see a rise in vacancies in government jobs? A lot of people are expecting the government to spend more and more at this time. And that is what economists are saying needs to happen, that you need a much greater fiscal stimulus. Binu, you have said technology is unreliable, but these kind of discussions are an eye-opener, so please do these live streams. We certainly plan on doing these live streams. We have no idea why we lost the video to Mahesh, and we are still trying to keep this going. Now, I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes to see if we can get Mahesh back with us. I'm going to try this again. And we're going to hope that it works. And hopefully, you all are going to forgive us our slight teething problems with internet bandwidth and with technology. We actually don't know if it's at our end or if it's at the end of Mr. Mahesh Vyas. We are still trying to get him back in. And I'm very, very curious to see how he would respond to, in particular, Abhilash Pradhan's question. And once again, I have Mahesh back, but I'm just not able to see his video for some reason. So while we keep this going, let me read out some more questions that we have. I don't know why this is actually happening, but we'll give it a couple of more minutes, and then if we don't get it, then maybe we'll call him back for another session at some other point. Okay, so let's take some more questions. I know a lot of you are writing in. And remember, there will be many such programs on the state of the economy, on jobs losses, on salary cuts. So whether you're in education or whether you're in the private sector, we will be following this closely. You can see that Mahesh is trying very hard to rejoin us. Mahesh, can you hear us?
I can hear you clearly. I'm very sorry. It's my unstable internet which
Okay.
is causing a problem. I'm very sorry to all your viewers, but let's try to continue to talk.
Okay. All right.
So, Mr.
But
Pradhan.
yes, yes. To
Uh,
Abhilash Pradhan's question, Mahesh, go ahead. Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
So there are three things I was saying: that A, employment; B, work; C, income, which is the wages from your work. You can be employed, get your salary, and not have any work. We have actually seen that the proportion of people who used to have employment but no work to do used to be like less than 1%. It used to happen in the past also. That number in the lockdown went up to 8%. So it's very likely that some people in your viewers are people who have got employment, but they don't have work. Now, there are others who will have employment because my employer has not asked me to leave. He's saying, stay, hang on. There is no salary, or there may be salary, but there's no work. And sometimes it is some work and some salary. So the three things are not connected. You may have a job, you may not have work. You may have both, but you may not have income. You may be made to work.
Yeah.
You have employment, but no salary is coming to you. So the three are not linked. And what we do at CMI is we capture all three of them independently.
So when you call someone unemployed, what is this situation? What if this carries on? What if Abhilash Pradhan's wife continues to theoretically be on the rolls but doesn't get a salary, Mahesh?
So we will capture this. So we're capturing income independent of employment. Right. And we are seeing a dramatic fall in income. That's the crisis at hand. That if the government doesn't step in now, because the incomes have collapsed massively, while we saw nearly 25% fall.
Okay, we can't hear you now. Well, I think Mr. Vyas, maybe there's something in the stars, because the moment you start telling us how bad it is, we kind of end up losing some line or the other to you. But what Mahesh Vyas, Abhilash Pradhan, since we've been trying to get him to answer your question all this while, what Mahesh Pradhan was actually trying to tell us was that basically the situation is such where they are tabulating people who may be getting an income but are getting no work, or are not getting an income, are getting no work but are still on the rolls, and that is data that they're factoring in. Mahesh Vyas has said that he's having some bandwidth connection problems at his end, so we're going to try and get him to reconnect, please, if we can get him to reconnect. In the meantime, time for some light-hearted humor. Mukesh Panikkar has very kindly said that watching and listening to Barkha is better than listening to Kangana Ranaut. Thank you for being so kind. We thought we had no possibility to actually talk about real issues like the economy, like jobs, like things that actually affect you and me. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient. It's not actually at our end. Mr. Vyas is having serious technology problems at his end, but we're going to reconnect to him. Asha, you've also been very kind, saying, Barkha, don't worry about the tech snacks. This is a great conversation. We're glad that you find it useful. So questions are coming. Arindam Banerjee has a question. Can you give us your opinion on the technology sector? It seems that it's doing better, but is this a good sign? All right. We're going to keep that parked for Mahesh. And I'm going to see if, well, Mahesh is not there yet. Mahesh is not there yet. Okay. Mahesh has just sent me a text message saying he's having bandwidth issues at his end, but we're going to keep it going till it for another 10 minutes. We'll stay with you till 5 o'clock and we'll keep it going. I want to share my email for those of you who would like me to follow up your story, because this is going to be the big focus. We have a question, or a comment rather, from Binu. And Binu says, right, Binu here is saying, a friend spent 8 years in a high-end hospitality job, just lost it, but high-end employers may not be able to take him as no one's hiring, and he's not really a classic fit. Where does he go? This is happening a lot. This is feedback that's coming from a lot of people, and this is happening to a lot of people I know. Even in the media industry, people are getting laid off, and they are trying to get jobs commensurate to their skills, commensurate to their experience. But actually, it might be easier for people at a lower income level to actually get jobs again, compared to those, ironically, who have more experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes to see if Mr. Vyas can join us for a couple of last comments. Somebody suggesting that we should put him on a landline or a mobile with the speaker on, because the topic is good. Don't worry. Mahesh Vyas owes us a program, and you all have sent so many questions. Mehul Gupta says, I'm a fresher. From where can I get a job? And Mahesh Vyas was just sharing with us, in fact, that 10 million Indians, just think of that number, 10 million Indians actually seek to join the labor force every year. And we're already looking at 21 million salaried Indians who've lost their jobs since April. And this is, this is not counting the unemployed who already existed. Bachelors, a user called Bachelors has written saying Germany pays 70% of salaries due to loss of work. Would something like that ever happen here? I somehow doubt it. We had the government saying in parliament that it's not even counting the number of jobs that have been lost, especially among migrant workers. Someone is contradicting that comment and saying Germany doesn't pay 70%, it's close to 90%. It's almost full reimbursement for a job lost. The question from Roni is, are we in recession? And I'm going to ask them to, let's call him once again, please call him. Please call him. Yeah, let's step out and call him and see if he can rejoin, at least to make a couple of closing comments. Because I'm going to keep taking your questions as we try and sort this out. Arindam, your question is still due. Is this a good time for technology with so much of work actually getting digitized? Is it a good time for technology? I'm hoping that Mahesh can answer that. I wish I could, but I'm not a qualified economist, so I can only tell you what I've observed, and I can only kind of pass it along to experts. And for some reason, Mr. Vyas has had terrible bandwidth issues today, so we couldn't sort of get him back towards the latter end of the conversation. But I am going to read a couple of more comments, and just we'll stay with you till about 5 p.m. And see if we can get him back. So let me go through your comments. Mostly what people are saying is either that they have had job cuts in the education sector. Teachers are writing to us saying, while schools are taking full fees, teachers are not getting paid full fees. Teachers wrote in, I think Shikha wrote in saying, teachers are having to fall back on private tuition. Indian Nub says, please do more of these. We can ask questions directly and interact with you and the other panelists. We certainly plan on doing this. But as you can see, our inaugural episode ran into its share of teething problems. We thought the problem was at our end, but Mahesh Vyas just has a very bad internet connection today. Geeta Tripathi says, finally the right issues being taken up. Otherwise on television, we only see Sushant Singh Rajput and Hindu-Muslim issues. Well, we promise you here at Mojo Story to take the issues that really, really matters. And Shikha Rakshit, this is a very important question you raised about the education sector. So we're going to, in fact, take that up separately. We still don't have Mahesh back with us. Apologies to our viewers and all of you who made time to join our live stream. He just texted us to say his connections are not working at all. So for Arindam, you had a question about technology. I think everybody is digitizing, and our tech architecture is clearly not able to support us. Okay, so I'm just going to take a last question from Gautam Kumar. Gautam Kumar says he's a teacher in a coaching institute and he's not getting paid. AB Benevolent says, I'm a seasoned corporate professional having close to 20 years of variegated work environments. What is the scope for such people? Now, the truth is that it's a bad time all around. And I'm just going to do a recap of what the data looks like. Not to alarm you, but to focus on what's really important. India has crossed 5 million COVID cases, but the economy is what's really ailing. It's a cliche to say the economy is in the ICU, but it does feel something like that. India is possibly looking at its worst ever economic crisis. The CMIE, we had Mahesh Vyas, who heads the CMIE, says that 21 million salaried Indians have lost their jobs since April. And this does not factor in those who are already unemployed. So taken together, we could be looking at upwards of 40 million people who are without work today. How is this not the headline story in every media organization, every news organization, everywhere? India will have to maintain close to 10 million jobs. That's about 9.6 crore jobs every year without losing more jobs if it does not want to spiral into a huge crisis. CMIE says young Indians have been the worst hit. Indians between the age group of 24 and 30 have lost the maximum number of jobs. The estimates from other agencies are even more dire. We have an estimate from CRISIL, which says that there could be a permanent loss of 13%, 13% of real GDP in India, and that India could essentially be wiping off 30 lakh crores in cash terms. The World Bank says 40 million livelihoods of migrant workers in the informal sector could be hit. And the EDB has revised its contraction figures upwards from 4.5 to say that the Indian economy has contracted by 9% in the financial year 2020 to 2021. We believe that the economy, the job losses, the salary cuts, the churn in our education sector is the most important story in the next few months. If you would like to share your personal story, our emails are open for you. My personal email is barkha, B-A-R-K-H-A .dutt, D-U-T-T, at bdmpl.org. The Mojo Story email, our channel's emails are also open for you, themojo.in@gmail.com. Please do keep your comments coming in. I'm taking a last comment, I think, from the Indian Nub, who's speaking about working at Amazon. I'm trying to go up to your question because there are a whole lot of questions. And what did you want to say? I'm trying to find your question in the middle of a huge list, a huge list of questions that we've got. But we'll have to end it there because we just could not get back. We just couldn't get Mahesh Vyas back, and there was an internet connection at his end, which just probably goes to show how many people are online right now. It is close to 5 p.m., so we will say goodbye now. We will try and do a live stream every day with our viewers. Remember, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do subscribe. Click the bell icon so you can get notifications of all of our conversations. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow again with a new edition of special programming and ground reports on the Mojo Story. Thank you and goodbye.